All righty. Let me introduce myself. I am Karen Lazan, the District 2 Advanced Training Committee Chair, and I thank you again all for coming tonight. I'm excited to have Lee here presenting. He has an abundance of experience on this particular topic and is a wonderful instructor. He has been with Toastmasters for 30 years this month. He has held every club officer role multiple times, as well as area director, division director, and many district level leadership roles. He is most proud of having helped form 30 clubs during his Toastmasters journey. He has delivered many workshops, such as this one tonight. Building clubs and putting on workshops is his way of giving back to the organization in which he is proud to be a member. He is a self-proclaimed student of public speaking who loves to compete. Here are some of his notable speech competitions. In 1995, he was the District 1 Evaluation Champion. In 2009, he was the District 2 Evaluation Champion. And that same year, he was also the District 2 International Speech Champion. 2013, 14, and 15, District 2 Tall Tales Party Champion, which was sponsored by several D2 clubs. That sounds like a lot of fun. 2014, District 2 International Speech Champion. 2019, District 2 International Speech Runner-Up. And he has coached 5 Toastmasters who have made it to the World Championship of Public Speaking semifinals, finishing 3rd, 2nd, or 1st. The first place mentee went on to the world stage. Tonight, he will be presenting a highly interactive session on competing in and judging the International Speech Contest. The title is, Let's Get Speech Contest Competitors and Judges on the Same Page. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to distinguished Toastmaster, Lee Amatangelo.
All right, thank you very much, Karen, and thank you everyone who's joined. Do you want to go ahead and put the poll up, Karen, that we talked about? So let's get a feel for why you guys are here. I already got the list of, many of you are either interested in being a judge or a contestant, and most of you said you'd like to do both. But let's go ahead and fill out this poll real quick. Let's get a feel for where you are in terms of having competed in the past. Okay, looks good. All right. So it looks like about a third of the participants tonight have never competed. And so they're here to learn how to do that. And some are just here because they want to be a judge. It looks like some have competed at the club in areas, some have made it to the division, and one person looks like they made it to district. Assume that, well, I know 2 people in this room have made it to district. We're not just talking about the international. Baxter, you made it to district and won the table topics, right?
Yes.
And I know Omar's won district international a couple times. So we have a few that have made it to district. Excellent. And we have Omar who's made it beyond to the semifinals. Excellent. Okay, that's good to know. So tonight's session is all about you guys. You guys can ask whatever questions you want. If anybody has any questions right now, go ahead and open up. I mean, what are you trying to get out of this session tonight? It's to prepare you to be a contestant or to be a judge. And basically you need to learn the same information, right? I mean, I've seen over the past recent years that it seems like the judges are on a different page than the contestants. It almost seems like the judges have picked people who have won our district, but that district winning speech would not go any further and would not make it to the world stage. And so for people that come to me and want to get to the world stage, I try to help them get there. I've studied the last 35 winners. I know Omar has studied them as well. And so when you look at those speeches, you find a commonality. So this is how I'm teaching our district members who want to be a world champion in public speaking when our judges are not looking for the same criteria. It seems like we're at a disadvantage for our contestants, as well as our district is not going to get on the map. Wouldn't it be cool if District 2 was continually putting people into the semifinals and putting them onto the world stage? That would say something about our district. So that's one of the reasons that we're putting on this workshop. I'm sad to say I heard speeches 30, 25, 20 years ago that were better than some of the speeches I've heard in the last 5 years. I've seen speeches that were well crafted. They inspired you. They made you think. They made you want to do something. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And some of the speakers in the last couple of years, it seems like they were just talking. There's a difference between talking and speaking. Talking is just a bunch of words, and usually when people are talking, they're just speaking off the top of their heads. You get a lot of and, ums, and so's because they're thinking of what they want to say, whereas a speaker has something that's well crafted. It has humor. It has figures of speech. It has storytelling with really good storytelling techniques of different characters with different voices, a plot, a conflict, a resolution, a lesson that was learned. That's a crafted speech. And those are the type of speeches that you see on the world stage. Those are the type of speeches that win. Because those type of speeches can make the audience think, they can make them feel, they can make them want to act. So we'll talk more about that. So any questions off the top of the bat that anybody has that they want to get out of this session? Okay, let's go ahead and just go into I put a PowerPoint together just in case you guys didn't have questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you guys are going to be able to see this. Can you see my screen being shared? Okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead and go down here. I guess I got to click on here first. Okay, what do you want to experience when you watch or listen to speech? I'm talking about when you go to a Toastmaster meeting and speakers are going to be in front of you, or when you go to a competition. What are you expecting to get out of those speeches? Go ahead, take yourself off mute. Tell me what you expect to get from a speech. You have decided, you've prioritized that you're going to go to this meeting, a Toastmaster meeting, or you're going to go to a contest. You've prioritized that in your life. You're an audience member. What are you expecting to get? You've put your time there. Your time is valuable. So what would you like to get out of a speech? Omar.
I call it the Monday morning drive. I want to be able to, the following morning on my way to work or wherever I'm heading to, I want to be able to think about that particular speech. Has it influenced me enough that it wasn't just an in the moment type of an experience, but one that's going to take over the next day or so in my thought level and possibly my emotional connection?
Great, Omar, because as a speaker, isn't that what we want to do? Don't we want to deliver a message that our audience remembers an hour after the meeting, a day after the meeting, months after the meeting? When I went with Omar to Palm Desert in 2010, I'm in District 2 now, Seattle. I hadn't seen my District 1 members for a while. I ran into a couple, and the new district director was someone that was in the Mattel headquarters club where I went and spoke. And she came up to me and across the room, she starts holding her hand up like this. And she walks up to me and she goes, I remember the speech you gave in my club when you talked to us how to organize a speech, the opening, the 3 points, the conclusion, and how the opening touches all the points in the conclusion. And I hadn't delivered that speech in over 10 years, and she remembered that. So that was valuable for me to have that kind of experience with somebody. But that's what we want to do as speakers, right? We want to impact our audience so they remember our speeches. So what do we want to experience when we watch and listen? We want something that makes us think, makes us feel, and makes us want to do something, right? The speeches that really make us feel good in the moment are the speeches that entertain us. I have changed my whole perspective on how I mentor people on how to speak. Before it was your message, let's get your message out. I focus a lot on entertaining the audience, because the audience, when you entertain them, they start liking you and they start wanting to listen to you. And if you're really good, go watch the #1 TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson, by the end of those 16, 17 minutes, I fell in love with this guy. And let me tell you, I'm a staunch heterosexual, okay? I fell in love with, I liked this guy. I wanted to be his friend. I wanted to be around me. I wanted to hear his stories. I wanted to be around this guy after he got done doing his 16-minute presentation. That's what we want as speakers. We want our audience to fall in love with us, because when they fall, they want to listen to you. They value what you say. And when you do that, initially by entertainment, when you look at since 2000, Ed Tate taught us to entertain our audience all the way through. He was the first time that did humor all the way through his speech. The next year, Darren LaCroix does 29 laughs in his 7 minutes and 48 seconds. Yes, he went over time because there was a timing malfunction. He got extra time and he used it. Okay. Entertainment is valuable. Stories, humor, figures of speech, singing. Those are some of the concepts that we see the world champions do. We want to learn something. We want to feel something, and we want to be able to do something after we've heard a great speech, right? They've provoked us cerebrally. They've stimulated us emotionally. They've motivated us to act. And as speakers, we want to do that to our audience, right? When we experience that as an audience member, we like it. So what I'm saying is, if that's what you want to experience as an audience member, do that as a speaker, okay? And I expect our judges in the room to learn this as well. This is what you should be looking for in the speakers, that these speakers have entertained us. They've made us think about things, they made us feel something, and they made us want to do something. That's powerful when you can do that as a speaker. When you can stand in front of an audience and in 7 minutes make them want to do something, that is powerful, okay? Get excited about life. We've inspired them. And when you look at what I see as the top speakers in the World Championship, the commonality that I find is that they've had us have an overall great ride, a fun ride. Even though they may have talked to us at a point where we wanted to cry in their speech, by the end of the speech, they've taken us through this gamut of emotions, and we go, that was a fun ride to go with that speaker. That's what you want to do as a speaker, and judges should be looking for that. And this is what I was teaching in the workshop I did earlier this year, the word rhetoric. I pulled it up online, and I like item number 6. I've added one more item to it, but really, as a speaker, it is the art of influencing the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions of our audience. That's rhetoric. And everything we do in Toastmasters can be considered rhetoric, from the way you dress. In the old days, let's do pre-COVID, when you were announced to come up on the stage to do a speech contest, the way you dress starts saying something about you. If the audience likes the way you're dressed, that you have prepared for this audience, that's rhetoric. When you have an organized speech, that's rhetoric. When you have humor and storytelling, all of that is rhetoric. You are making the audience think and feel and act, and they like you. They're falling in love with you. Everything that we do around giving the message is all about rhetoric, okay? Our vocal variety, all of that is rhetoric. Okay, so always focus on rhetoric. What's the first order of business as a speaker? We have to figure out what to talk about. What are we going to talk about? Anybody want to give some ideas of what you're going to talk about? Omar, what have you talked about on some of your plethora of speeches you've given?
Anything that has to do with the universal understanding that people can relate with, which more than likely in my case, it's been my mother.
Excellent. It's talking universally. That's a great word, universally. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But what the audience wants when you walk out on that stage is they want to hear your story, not you telling other people's stories in competition. They want to hear your story. Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Karina has her hand up.
Sure, go ahead, Karina.
I told before, so I think we can continue.
Okay.
Okay.
So universal themes that the entire audience will hear, right? The mundane stuff that we go through life, that you can find something witty to talk about, some great message that came out of that, the audience will identify with that. And if you go out to the website that Karen's going to display at the end of the meeting, if she displays it now, you're all going to go out there and start going through that, and you'll not be listening to the speaker. And as a speaker, you never want to compete with your visual aid. So Karen's going to do that at the very end, but there's a plethora of information. You can go through it. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, and I'll answer any questions. But out there are handouts on how to select your topics. And it's about what you think about and what you dream about. Those are the topics that you should pick, okay? What is your why? So we got this from Randy Harvey. Randy Harvey's a 2004 world champion of public speaking. Here's a great way to start figuring out what you're going to talk about. Why are you? Describe yourself. What drives you every day? When I say, why are you? What makes you up, right? What is your core belief system? Talk about that. The second question is, what are you? What are you about, right? What are you about? What is the immutable stuff? If you are a religious person, that typically is immutable. If you're a very family-oriented person, for example, Randy Harvey will tell you, whenever his cell phone rings and it's someone from his family, he takes that as a priority. He now is a lawyer. Luckily, they don't allow cell phones in the courtroom, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But his family is very important to him. That's an immutable trait for him. What is immutable about you? Are you a vegan? Is that immutable, right? What caused you to be vegan? Those are things that make what you are. And then, what are great lessons that you have learned in life? When Omar has done some of his speech, he talks about his mother. He talks about the lessons he learned from mom, either directly or indirectly. So lessons that you have learned are great to share with the audience. And as Omar said, he's looking for the universal lessons that all of us will want to hear and understand and say, oh, I like the way Omar dealt with that situation. That situation's happened in my life. That's interesting to hear him. People lean in. We're all busybodies. So those are great lessons. And then the fourth one is, who taught you that? Don't just tell the lesson, but tell us who taught you that. Was it a grandparent, a parent, another family member? Was it a coach, a mentor, a teacher? Those are typically the people that we have learned lessons from in our life. So those are great questions to look for. I have another lesson out there called Release the Music Within. I'll let you guys go through it. It's very simple to go through, but you can use that one as well to find your topics. So find your topics, narrow them down, get a message that you believe the entire audience is going to want to hear. When you deliver your message in front of an audience, what percentage of the audience would you like to hit with that message? Anybody want to venture a guess on what's a good number? 50%, 60%? What's a good number?
I think.
Go ahead,
100%.
Omar. What are you going to say? Is it 100%? Is that what you want to say?
One person is all.
Well, I say you want to hit 100% of the audience. You want to write messages that the entire audience will want to listen to. If you're only targeting 80%, you've just alienated 20% of your audience. And we'll talk about what type of speeches you should not do, okay? So universal lessons that you think everybody will want to listen to. Second order of business, what not to talk about. Anybody want to venture a guess what are not subjects to talk about in a competition? Now, I'm not saying your speeches. You can do what I'm going to mention in just a second, what not to talk about in competition. You can do those in your Toastmaster clubs. You can do those in other venues, and they have their place there. But in competition, they do not belong here. So what do you think are some of the top? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say the same things that you try not to talk about at around the Thanksgiving dinner table: sex,
Okay.
politics, and religion.
Okay. And why would we not talk about some of those? Because if your religion is not the religion of other people, you're kind of getting confrontational. Maybe
You've lost the 100%. You know, I'm old enough that I was raised that you know, we don't talk about sex in polite company.
okay. Politics.
In the current environment, if you talk about politics, you're going to alienate half of the people who disagree with you and half of the rest for having brought it up.
Okay, right. So things that will offend people where you have a difference of opinion, You're not trying to convince an audience to be Democratic if you're a Democrat, right? That's not going to work in a competition speech. You can do that in some other venue. Okay, so what do we not talk about? Here's a very kind of high level list. You're not there to teach the audience something. You're not going to be teaching them calculus or quantum physics. That's not the point of a competition speech. Okay. You're not going to preach a point. And I saw so many speeches last year that were preaching. What do I mean by preaching? You hear statements in the speech such as, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. That is preaching. A better way, whatever the topic was, you could still do the topic, but tell a story that shows what happens when you do that topic, as opposed to telling the audience, you should do the topic. Let them vicariously live through you as one of the characters in the story that went through that topic, and they go, oh, I see why I should do that. But when you tell them verbatim to do it, and you haven't given them really good examples why, no audience wants to be preached to, not even audiences on Sunday mornings sitting in church. The best preachers and ministers are ones that tell stories. And people from miles around will come to that church because they're going to be entertained. They're going to listen and feel the story, and they're going to understand the message as opposed to being told to do something. You don't want to be promoting an idea. We don't want to go to a competition speech and have Omar preach to us why we should go to him as a speaking coach. He's promoting an idea, and we say, Omar, we don't want to hear this. Okay. A story where you are the hero. Right? Going back to the previous slide, what lessons have you learned and who taught them to you? The teacher of the lesson is the hero, and you are a person listening to the lesson and growing through the lesson and going from not knowing something and knowing something through that lesson. We vicariously go through that process with you when you do it that way. You don't want to be the hero, okay? Ills of society. The audience doesn't want to hear about alcoholism, child abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse. Those are not the topic of the speech. They may be an element somewhere in the speech, but it is not the topic that you are presenting to the audience, okay? These are subjects not to talk about. You do not have a fun ride if someone talks about sexual abuse for 7 minutes. That's kind of hardcore for some people. Now, what's going to happen when Omar used the word universal? If you've never experienced sexual abuse and you start hearing this, you may tune out just because you don't want to hear about it. There may be some people in the audience who have experienced sexual abuse, and they may want to lean in and hear what your story was. There may be people in the audience who have experienced sexual abuse, and they don't want to hear about it anymore. They've already gone through it, right? So you've alienated 2/3 of those group of people. That's not a universal story. So the ills of society are not the ones that you want to talk about. So let us have a fun ride. Let us have a fun ride. Okay, what are the 2 attributes that separate you as a speaker from the writer? What are the 2 obvious attributes that separates the speaker from the writer? Because this is important. This is important for judges to know.
There's an
Okay,
audience.
go ahead, Omar.
Pronouns.
Pronouns.
A,
Okay,
a speaker can actually deliver a message without using pronouns. A writer cannot.
okay. We'll come back to that one. Someone else had a comment?
That you have an audience, immediate feedback.
Oh, okay, who said that?
That's Peter.
Peter, okay, Peter up top. Okay, so Peter's getting close to what I'm going for here. Think about pre-COVID and you're speaking in front of an audience, either at your Toastmaster meeting or in a competition. You are standing in front of an audience and you are physically present with them. When you read, how many people like to read a story before they go to bed? They get in bed, they pull out one of the contemporary novels and they start reading it, right? That speaker is not there. But when you're speaking in front of an audience, you are there physically. So your physical presence is important. And what else is different? When you're reading the author, it's you interpreting the words on the page. When you're sitting in an audience in front of a speaker, you hear that voice. And that vocal voice from the speaker is much more powerful than the written word, because the voice can exactly say what the words are intended to be meant. Whereas if you're falling asleep reading a story, you may not get what the writer was really intending. Okay, so voice and physical presence are the two attributes that separate the speaker from the writer. So the judges should be listening to voice, and they should be looking at the physical presence. Those are the two powerful kind of global attributes that the speaker has. This is a speech contest. So the judges should be looking for speaking attributes. And I have come up with what I call the 7 Ps of vocal variety. And judges should be looking for these: pitch, power, pace, pause, prominence, percussion, and persona. Pitch, what is pitch? Pitch is the tone of the voice, the frequency, right? When you look at a piano keyboard, every key has a different pitch, a different frequency. Every key on that keyboard is identified by a different note on the sheet of music. And when you hit that note, it has a different tone. So tone, pitch, frequency, and note are all synonymous terms. So we change our pitch. High pitches, low pitches, right? Power is the volume. We go loud at times and sometimes we go soft, right? Pace, sometimes we speak fast, sometimes we speak slower. And then there's the ubiquitous pause. And the words after the pause take on extra importance. And then there's a prominence, an extra emphasis we put on words, right? We have that. We have the percussion, and that is the beat, the lyrical nature of our speaking that we have. And when we forget what we want to say, we keep the beat by saying ahs and ums. So the way you remove the ahs and ums is you always keep your thoughts out in front of your words, okay? And then there's persona. Persona is when we're doing storytelling and our characters take on a different persona of voice and physical attributes, okay? So the 7 Ps of vocal variety. I never said he took my money. Here's what I want to talk about: the voice. If I say, I never said he took my money, period, that's an emphatic statement. If I say, I never said he took my money, that now becomes a question. Exact same words, but those 7 words take on a totally different meaning. That is how the voice of the speaker is much more powerful than the written word by the writer. And I've taken this phrase and I've counted over 158 different meanings that this phrase can have, and I stopped counting. That's how powerful you can say this word different ways, that you, as a writer, you'd have to hope that the reader is in tune to what you're saying at that point. Okay, so we want judges to be really cognizant of how the speakers are using their voice. It's more than just the words. It is the connotation and the denotation of the words. Okay, and then we have the different attributes of a speaker that are physical: their appearance, their stance, their posture. Your stance is how you are positioned in front of the audience. Your posture is, do you have a good speaking voice where your lungs are filled with air? Because it's the air in our lungs that gives us the power of our voice. Okay, we have the facial, we have the eye contact, we have the facial expressions, we have the arms and hand and legs gesture, and we have the physical movement on the stage. The judges should be looking for all that as well, right? There's the speaker's nonverbal communication, the stuff that we do without speaking, okay? And you can get all these handouts that talk about that. All right. There is what I call the science of speaking, the science we can teach anybody. The primary goal of a speaker is what? Who wants to tell us what the primary goal of every speaker is? Whether someone's standing in a Toastmaster meeting giving a speech, a shoe salesman, a lawyer, a teacher in a classroom, the CEO of a company talking to the all hands. What is the primary goal of every one of these speakers? Marie? Say again?
To share an idea.
To share an idea. Yes, to give a message to the audience. That's all we have to do as a speaker, is give a message to the audience. And we do that through all of these great techniques that we have. How we look, our physical attributes, our voice, Our well-organized speech, do we speak in earnest? Do they believe us? Are we getting to the point? Have we crafted our talk that we've written and got out of all the redundant words or redundant thoughts? Trim down our sentences. Do we really get to the point so we're really very precise in what we're saying? Are we using vocal variety to keep the audience entertained? Are we exhibiting physical attributes with gestures and movement? Are we in front of an audience without any lectern or notes? So we show that we have prepared for our audience? And have we removed all those verbal pauses? All those make us come across as a well-honed and cultivated speaker. Okay, we can teach anybody those skills, but then there's the art of speaking. And this is where you have to get in front of an audience and do this over and over again and see what works and what does not work. Storytelling techniques. Do you have a conflict? Do you have a resolution? Have you learned a lesson? And really, that is what a story is. There's a conflict and a resolution, and through the story, you go from conflict to resolution, and you've learned some lesson. And the audience learns it with you. Are you humorous? Are you making them laugh? Are you making the audience excited to hear what you're saying because you're entertaining to them? Figures of speech. Are you stimulating parts of the brain of the audience without the audience even knowing it, but they like what's going on? Okay, there's a lot of handouts on that. Sound and rhythm. We don't just have our words, but we can make them musical or lyrical. We can bring them to life. Some people actually sing on the world champion stage, okay? The five senses, have we brought in the five senses? Smelling being the one that the audience loves to hear about. So bring those to life in your stories, okay? A lot of people write their speech and they start writing it a week before their club contest in February. That's when they start doing the international speech contest. We're doing this workshop pretty early. We're here in November, December, January. You can start writing your speeches now. You should be writing them now and start honing them and trimming them down and making them precise and adding more humor, adding more storytelling techniques, adding more figures of speech. And you make that speech powerful and five-dimensional. Okay, some people write their speech and they do the words. They may move some of the stuff around and they go, my speech is done. That's like taking all the ingredients for a cake, mixing them all up, pouring them into the cake platters and saying, okay, I'm done with my cake. Those are the words. That's the talk. What is missing from that cake? We actually have to go bake it, don't we? Okay. Some people stand in front of the audience and they just talk. They give us the words. They have not brought them to life with music and tonality and figures of speech and humor. This is where the fun part of writing a speech comes in. After you have the words and you've moved things around and you've organized it the way you want it, now comes the fun. Trim it down. Add more humor. Add more storytelling. Add the figures of speech. This is what makes the speech pop. This is where you can intone your voice. Here's where you can do movement. Here's where you can actually make a pause, cause laughter for an audience. That's powerful. That's powerful. And as you're doing your little nuggets, as you're walking through your speech and you're watching the faces of your audience and you see them leaning in, as a speaker, that is so powerful. And as you move on the stage, pre-COVID, you're moving on the stage and you see the eyes riveted on you. That's powerful as a speaker. This is where you want to be. That does not happen when the speaker is up there just talking and saying words. Bring your speech to life. Make the audience have an experience. Let them be present in the moment. Have them start thinking. Have them start feeling. Have them, by the end of your speech, want to go do something without you ever asking them to do something. You're not preaching, but yet they want to go do something. At the end of a preached speech, I want to do anything else other than what the person just preached to me about. Do you see the difference? Okay. So that's what we're doing as speakers, judges. You need to be looking for this, looking for, has the speaker invoked speaking attributes? It is a speech contest. Don't just listen to the content, listen to how the speaker delivered that content and who delivered it with the most use of speaking techniques. There are so many. And those are the speakers that we should be moving forward to the next level. Our district should be looking at a speech that could win on the world stage. If you're judging at the district level, the division or the district level, you should be looking for speeches that you'd be proud that District 2 is pushing forward to the semifinals. And you should understand what kind of speeches those are. If all you want to do is be a judge, I will say this. If you are not competing, after a certain level, you should not be judging. If you have not gone through this process yourself to see what it takes, you're missing what the speakers are doing. Darren LaCroix's speaking coach that took him to the semifinals in 2001. He then goes on to the world stage and wins in 2001. His speaking coach, after he won the semifinals, told Darren, he says, I can't take you any further. I have not been on the world stage. I don't know what to tell you. So at that point, Darren LaCroix gets Mark Brown, the 1995 world champion, and they're still partnering today, 20 years later. That's the one that helped him on the world stage, someone who had been on the world stage. If world champions need someone who has gone to the world stage, how can a judge be judging our district level if they themselves have never been on the district stage? Okay? Recuse yourself if you feel you don't have the skills to go forward. If when you've decided to be a judge at a certain level, all of a sudden, one of the contestants is someone you know, maybe someone you like or someone you don't like, recuse yourself because you are going to inflict bias in your judging, whether you think you are or you're not. You will do it. It's just human nature. Okay. Figures of speech. Let's talk about those for a little bit. Those are powerful because they stimulate the brain in a way that people don't even know, because we keep the words on the left side of our brain and we have our images on the right side of our brain. In the middle of our brain is where we have our memory. So when you invoke figures of speech, all of a sudden you have all this transmission going on in the brain of the audience. The brains of the audience are being stimulated, which means the audience members are being stimulated. As a speaker, you are stimulating your audience. That's exactly what you want to do. So you can go out and see some of the handouts on the website that go into great detail about what image and simile and metaphor and personification and illusion, all those. I suggest you go do figuresofspeech.com. Rhetoricians, linguists have identified over 250 figures of speech. I've heard a short definition of figures of speech using words that say differently than what the words are saying, right? But there are other figures of speech that are actually the words themselves, but they're more emphatic, they're more exaggerated. So go check out figures of speech and look at the power of them. Simile and metaphor are very powerful. When you want to explain an idea to an audience, a great way to do that is through analogy. And simile and metaphor and personification, those are forms of analogy. You analyze, you give an analogy of something that they understand to explain something that they don't understand. You give an analogy of something that is known to explain something that is unknown. Those are powerful tools to use. And then what I like to do when I'm mentoring people is to do polyrhetoric. Within one sentence, do alliteration and also do a simile. So we have two figures of speech and also do humor. You have three rhetorical devices all inside one sentence. That's powerful. You are stimulating the audience in many different ways with just one sentence. This is the fun of writing the speech. Get your message down, get your speech written, get it organized in the way you want, and now start honing that speech. Cut out as much as you can that is redundant or does not align with the theme of that speech. And then go have fun by putting in the humor and putting in the storytelling and putting in the figures of speech. And as a speaker, these are little milestones that you're going to hit as you do your speech. And you're excited to get to those milestones, and that helps facilitate you memorizing that speech. This is the fun. Have a goal in mind. How many of you have a desire to be the world championship of public speaking? Raise your hand. How many have the desire, right? If you have the desire, do you also have the commitment? Are you setting time aside every day or every week to work on this? And if you have the commitment, are you putting in the time? And if you're not doing those three, you're probably never going to achieve your goal. And I have a fourth one. It's called perseverance. As we all know, we compete, we go to a certain level of the speech contest, we think we did a great job, and we did not win. You have to persevere and continue to compete again the next time. If you say, no, I don't want to compete anymore, I didn't like that experience, sometimes the judges got it right, sometimes they didn't get it right. Sometimes years later, you're going to realize why you didn't win that one level, okay? You have to persevere. Those are the people. In 2012, we had a winner called Brian Avery. In 2011, he set a year aside to write his speech. He put a whiteboard in his living room. Him and his wife worked on this speech. And up in the corner of that whiteboard, he wrote, 2012 World Champion of Public Speaking, Brian Avery. He didn't just set a goal to be the world champion. He set the milestone when he was going to do it. And in 2012, the world champion of public speaking was Ryan Avery. Will that happen for all of us? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, you need to be committed and you need to have goals set and you have to be really specific. That's how you do this. When I mentor people, I say, okay, you want to work on a world championship public speaking? Don't worry about not competing this year. We may not be ready this year. Let's write a speech now for next year. Does it matter if you win the world championship this year or next year? It doesn't really matter. You just want to be the world champion, because once you're the world champion, you're now exempt from ever competing. When you get on that world stage, you want to have something that you are proud of to deliver to that. You're excited to deliver to that audience. You want to be freaking out like, oh, I just wrote this a couple weeks ago. You want to have something ready. You want to have at least 3 good speeches when you are serious about competing one year. You need at least 2. Have a third one there ready in case one of them becomes more powerful than the other, okay? So judges, you should be looking for speeches that are world caliber. If you don't know what that is, you need to go start looking at the world championship speeches that have won and start looking at that commonality. I'll tell you something, they are personal stories. They have storytelling in them with characters. There's different voices of the characters, different mannerisms. There's humor. Some of them do a little bit of singing in their speeches, showing that they can flex their vocal range. Some sing, but they don't actually sing to impress the audience with their voice. But what I will say with the ones I like the most, I had a fun ride going through that speech with those world champions. And they're memorable because they did humor, they did storytelling, they did figures of speech. They were memorable. I remembered their speeches. And as some of the people in this room know, my favorite speaker of all time is Randy Harvey. His speech was so well written. He was an educator for 30 years. His family were longtime storytellers. They competed against each other as they sat around in family events. He wins the world championship in 2004. He's now a Juris Doctor. He's now a lawyer. What does being a teacher, a speaker, and a lawyer all have in common? You stand in front of an audience and you speak. I would love to see Randy Harvey as a trial lawyer and see how he sways that audience He totally understands figures of speech and uses those to his advantage to stimulate an audience. He's a great storyteller. He has great humor in his speeches. Can you imagine him swaying an audience? He could probably win every trial that he ever does, right? So make yourself a great speaker by learning these attributes. Okay. What do we have next? Sound and rhythm. Learn about syllables and phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest unit of sound, right? There's different phonemes. The word dental is a dental phoneme sound because our tongue goes to the back of our teeth. Labial is an example of a labial sound. Our tongue goes on our labia, our lips. Palatal is a palatal sound. Our tongue goes to our palate. Guttural, the back of our tongue goes to our palate, but we speak from our gut when we say guttural, right? So that's a guttural sound. Nasal, the sound comes from our nose. Nasal is an example of nasal. Those are all different phonemes that help your sound that you want to give to the audience, okay? Have fun with your speeches. They are not just the sequence of words. They are words told in a certain way. As I told you, I did a little sentence a while ago. The exact same sentence took on two different meanings. How did we do that? We did that with our voice and our sound. There's consonants, there's alliteration, there's assonance, there's sibilants. These are all fun sounds that the audience likes to hear. What's alliteration? A string of words that all start with the same sound. Consonant is having the same sound within the words, usually consonants. Assonance is the same vowel sounds. And when we use the S sound, we give that a special word. It's called sibilants. And audiences love this. It's rhythmic, it's memorable. She sells seashells by the seashore. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. It's fun to say and it's memorable. Okay, what does rhythm do? What does rhyme do? Rhyme can get a person out of prison. If you remember the O.J. Simpson trial, there was a rhyme given that persuaded the audience. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. That was said many times in the closing arguments by Johnny Cochran, who himself has a very lyrical, musical sound to his voice. And they all remembered when he said, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. They all remembered OJ trying to put the glove on his hand, showing it didn't fit. It was so powerful in imagery, and that rhythmic words that went along with that visual swayed the audience, and the verdict was not guilty. Our words are powerful when we say them. And it's more than just the words. It's how we say them. It's the music, it's the rhyme, it's the rhythm, it's the intonation, it's our vocal variety. Speakers and judges, you should be looking for this in your speeches. Okay, the five senses, we've talked about that. Emotional connections. Omar talked about a universal emotional connection that the audience has, right? And here's what I've come up with. It's a phrase called just love fads. It's the dichotomy of different emotions that we have. If you're going to talk about joy, you have to talk about sadness. Typically, we do it the other way around. We have sadness in our speech, but the sadness only becomes powerful because by the end of the speech, we have joy. We've turned it around. There is uncertainty. The opposite of uncertainty is peacefulness. We have anxiety, anticipation, suspense, and doubt. If you're going to talk about anxiety, you got to get people to a comfort level. If there's anticipation, you got to get them to complacency. If there's suspense, you got to get them to an apathetic, steady state. If there's doubt, you got to get them to confidence. If there's surprise, you got to get the audience back to calm. And if there's deceit, you got to get them to trust. Ryan Avery's speech in 2012 was all about deceit and trust. His catchphrase was, trust is a must. Trust is a must. And he said that many times. By the end of the speech, you realize that trust is a must in a relationship. In the English language, we have this one word, love, but I've identified in the Greek language 9 different words. We like to hear about love. And so you can go and look at all 9 different words of love. I'm not here to teach speech today, just to tell you what is important and what the audience loves to hear. And then there's fear and courage, anger, serenity, disgust, please, sorrow and solace. These dichotomy of emotions, these are what I identify as the most common emotions that we have as humans. Of course, there's a lot more, but these are the ones that the audience identifies with. And so when you have your theme of your message of your audience, of your speech, it usually will have some of these concepts in them, one of these concepts in them, right? Okay. I'll leave you with this, the layering process. This is what I think makes speaking fun. Okay, we're coming up on the hour, and I'll just end off with this, and we'll spend a little time talking about the actual judging of a contest. So I want you to select a message. Identify the message that you want to talk about. Now that you have your message, you go off and you write. And you stop writing, you take a break. You pick it back up. It could be an hour later, it can be a day later, it can be several days later. Write some more. And when you write, don't ever cross out what you've written. Just start rewriting that line again or the whole paragraph. Just rewrite it again. Keep everything that you've written. Take a break, write again. And I strongly suggest you write using a word processing unit, right? You're using Word, you're using Notepad, you're doing it digitally. Because the next line is, we're going to start organizing it. When you're done writing, you're going to start organizing. You may move stuff around. It's very easy to move it around when you have it digitally. If you have it written out on paper, you're cutting stuff and you're moving around. That's a lot more laborious. Let's say there was a word you used in your speech all the way through, but you decided to change that word to something else. Very easy to change that word to something else with a word processor. If you've written it on paper, you have to go and find every time you wrote that word and change it. So I strongly suggest you do it digitally, because you're going to keep honing your speech as you go along. Now that you have it organized the way you want it, go through again and get to the point. Here's a line I wrote for my speech in 2014. My father is talking to me. Son, why are you in the house watching television? You should be outside playing with your friends, running around, having adventure. Son, why are you in the house watching television? You should be outside. I realized that there's the same concept there. Why am I inside watching television? I should be outside. I only need to say one of those. Son, why are you watching television? You should be outside playing with your friends. So there I was able to rip out redundant concepts. Again, why am I inside watching television? How many people have their television outside? Again, there was another reason why you don't need to say those words twice. So those are areas you don't just look for the same word being used several times or the same phrase. Look for the same concept being used where you can rip out. And when you look at these world championship speeches, they are so short with their sentences and so precise. And when you do that, you can say more. You can put more humor in. You can put more storytelling elements. You might even be able to write a whole nother section to the speech that supports the theme of your speech. So always get to the point. My mantra is, if you can say something in 20 minutes or in 2 minutes, opt for the 2 minutes. You've just saved 18 minutes of time for everybody in your audience. If you have 100 people in the audience, you just saved 1,800 minutes of time, right? So always opt for brevity. So I say what I spend most of my time on my speeches, or when I'm working with somebody as I'm helping mentor them with their speech, is get to the point. Because when you get to the point, the audience knows exactly what you're saying, and be very precise. Anybody that knows me in a Toastmaster meeting knows my pet peeve word is the word thing. It is the most nondescript word ever. As a speaker, you should never use the word thing. I'm going to say 3 things today. No, I'm going to say 3 points today. I want you to identify 3 things for you to do in this meeting. No, I want you to define 3 objectives. I want you to come up with 3 things you're going to do this year. No, I want you to come up with 3 goals this year. You can always replace the word thing with a very precise noun. And when you do that, your audience knows exactly what you're talking about. Objectives, goals, or points. And they get it. So be very precise and get to the point. When you're all done with that, now you come back around on your speech and you add the humor. You do more storytelling. You bring your stories to life with characters, with movement, with voices. And you tell the story not through narrative. I went to the supermarket, I met her, she said this, then I said this, I did this, she did that. That's all narrative. I went to the store and I met my friend Sally. Then I start speaking in a woman's voice. They know that that's Sally's voice. Then I go back to my voice. And Sally may have a limp. So whenever time Sally talks, she has a limp, right? There's characteristics about the physical characteristics we can breathe to life and the voice. And you do all that and you tell the story through dialogue. And the audience loves that much more than narrative. Okay, so figures is do the good storytelling, then go in and look for the figures of speech. I need to really make this point prominent here. A great way to do that is to use a simile. Let the audience understand something that they know about and relate it to the point you're trying to make. Oh, now the audience gets your point because you've related it to something known. And if you're really good, you make them laugh at the same time. Okay, polyrhetoric. Ensure that as you're going through, you're using your voice, your lyrical, your musical, your poetic, your rhyming. Make sure that at certain points in your speech, you are connecting with the audience. You should have a salutation sometime in your speech where you acknowledge the Toastmaster and you acknowledge the audience. There should be times in your speech when you're making a really powerful point. Ask the audience a question about that point. Have you ever done this, whatever the this is? Let them answer that question in their heads. You've made a connection with them. Always do connections with your audience as you go through. And then have the emotional connections. Omar.
Yeah, to your point on asking questions, polling the audience, whatever you want to refer
Right.
to it as, one of the perspectives behind that is that I've come to understand through my experience, asking a question of that nature is going to alienate some of the people, because have you ever puts people in a position that those that have will agree with you and those that have not won't. A way that I've actually started using many years ago is, do you recall time when you, or remember the time that? Those that did or did not, doesn't matter. They're going to be influenced in order to remember, to be part of that talk, because everybody wants to be part of the community. And so the idea is, and again, I'm not here to argue. I'm just trying to see what your point is, what you just mentioned, and see how I looked at it and see how we can come to an accord here. We're asking people to remember or recall as opposed to do something or ask something.
All right. So I think the way I asked it, I'm not actually asking them to recall, but this gets back to our theme being a universal theme, something that we've all identified with. And now the speaker is giving their perspective of how they did it. I think if you ask a question to connect with them, if they've never experienced it, I would think that they might lean in to want to hear what you've done, because they realize you're going to, I mean, you're telling a story about that point and you're asking other people. So I hear what you're saying. I guess we have two different perspectives on how to do that. But yeah, you definitely don't want to alienate people. But if it's a universal theme to begin with, then I think they're already interested. And they may not have ever experienced something the way you've experienced, but I think the theme itself of your speech, they've already experienced. So I think they're still with you. And now if they haven't experienced the specific point that you're talking about, they're waiting to hear how you did it. That's how I look at it. But I hear what you're saying. You don't want to alienate anybody, so you're asking them to remember. But again, if they didn't have that experience, what are they going to remember? You've instilled them to try to remember, but they have nothing to go to, right? So I don't know if it's any different, but maybe you have a different perspective. Yeah. All right, so after you've done that, then the next part is the physical nature of you. I want you now to do your gestures and body movement and facial expressions to go along with the words and sentences that you're saying. And then the next part is your overall speech. Plan out your stage movement. It's only a 7-minute speech. You don't have to reiterate a lot in a 7-minute speech. The audience remember what you said 5 minutes ago. Sometimes speakers think they have to reintroduce the same point to the audience again. Don't believe me, they remembered what you said. But if you put something down somewhere on the stage, you better go back to that part of the stage and pick that thing up from there. Don't go to another part of the stage. They're going, oh, there's a disconnect there. They put that over there and now they went over here. So remember where you've put stuff, plan out all your stage movement. If you're gonna have different points to make, do them at different parts of the stage. And then when you do your conclusion, you can just point to those different parts of the stage and the audience remembers the story you told at that point. It's a great way to use the physical space that you have to help do the logical flow of your speech.
And Lee, for your edification, I I refer to that as locational demystification, demystifying the location on the stage for
Okay.
what event occurs. And if you can demystify it, then more than likely it could be used as a tool and as an asset in order to bring people to engage with that moment or that experience in the location. So demystifying it is where I was at.
Excellent. Have you copyrighted that phrase yet, or can I steal it?
It's copyrighted, but by all means, I steal your stuff so you can steal mine.
I know. And my lawyer will get in contact with you soon. Okay. When you're all done doing all of this, now you have to start timing your speech. Make sure you got that under 7 minutes. Under 7 minutes. You're shooting usually between 6:30 and 7 because you have humor in your speech. You don't know that when you're in front of a big audience, the laughter may go longer. Let's say that your humor makes 10% of the audience laugh. You do it in your club with 20 people, 2 people laughed. Maybe, and laughter is kind of infectious. Maybe a couple other people laugh again. Now you go to the area with 40 people. 10% are going to laugh. 4 people laugh, but it's infectious. Maybe 6 or 8 people laugh. Then you go to division with 80 people. 8 people laugh, and 8 people in a room is pretty loud, and other people will start to laugh as well. You go to the district where you have several hundred people. You now have tens of people laughing, 20, 30, 40 people might be laughing. You go to the semifinals or the world stage, you have thousands of people there, you have hundreds of people laughing. So what you experience in the clubs can be very different than what you experience later on those different levels. And the laughter can go on longer because it's infectious. Some people start laughing, other people start laughing as well. So make sure your speech is somewhere between 6:30 and 7 minutes. And make sure you have that time down. If you go over 7 minutes and 30 seconds, you have not even bought one lottery ticket. And when you don't even buy one lottery ticket, you have 0 chance of ever winning the lottery. When you go over time, you have 0 chance of winning that speech contest. So get into the lottery, make sure you spend time doing your timing of your speech. And when you're all done with that, you continue to hone your speech, continue to keep going through it, continue to add more humor where you see it. If all of a sudden you realize, hey, I can trim these 2 sentences down to 1 sentence, go do it. The more time you can chew off of your speech, the more time you have to add more humor or just have longer pauses for the audience to digest what you've said. Always shoot for brevity. Continue to do that. And when you have those different nuggets that you've put in your speech, those are little milestones you're going to try to hit. It facilitates memorization. Now memorize your speech. Memorize your speech, but deliver it as if you're delivering it the first time, right? You know the words. You now are no longer trying to struggle to think about the words. You're going to be building a connection with your audience, with your eyes, and with your stage movement. That's where you want to be. You want to be having fun on that stage with that audience and not struggling to remember your words. And if you say a phrase a little bit different, don't worry about it. Keep on going. You're now a skilled speaker. Just keep on going. The audience doesn't know you said that line wrong. There are certain lines that you must say very precisely. Make sure you have those lines fully memorized, the intonation, the pause, the humor, have all that down. But all the other lines, don't worry about it. But you have it memorized, they just start to flow. And get it so it's so memorized, you're having fun there. And you need to have 2 or 3 speeches that you have this done, and you will do well in the speech contest. If you don't win, guess what? You are still a great speaker and do it again next year, but take that skill, this layering process. It's copyrighted, Omar, so don't steal this one. Go off and do this and become a fun speaker. Have fun with it. Don't make it work. And when you start doing this process, you're going to start writing your speeches in this layering process. You're going to start writing lines as you're thinking how the character in that story is going to say it, and the pause and the humor. And you start writing in the way of doing it this way, this layering process. Have your speech writing be fun. If you are committed to this, if you have the strong desire and you're committed, you should be writing all the time. Write all the time. So when it comes time to do your speech contest, you now have plenty of stories and speeches to put together. Okay. Okay, so let me stop there with the how to write together, how to write a speech. Judges, you should be looking for this in the speeches as well. Let's spend a little time on what the judges need to do with the ballots. So let me pop up a couple ballots here. Let me move this over. Let me pop this over here. You guys can see this now, right? Okay, let's go to here first. All right, so what are the judges looking for? It surely would be nice if the speakers in our district that spend a lot of time and take this seriously are being judged by the judges in a way that the judges are judging the world champions. I suggest for the contestants, you write a speech for the club level that you think is world stage worthy. Don't write a speech that's okay for club. Okay, now I'm gonna morph it a little bit for the area. Okay, I'm gonna morph it a little bit for the division. That's a speech that you haven't worked on for a while. You just started working on the speech. Have your speeches ready. You guys are now here in November. And only about 30 or so jumped on this call. Start writing your speeches now. For those of you that were at my workshop in spring and early summer, you guys have an advantage to start. You guys should have been writing your speech back then. I suggest you spend a year to write your speeches, to do all these different techniques that we talked about. Most of the speeches I heard over the last couple of years were just the words being said. And some you can tell the speaker was just talking. They didn't do any crafting of the speech. They're just talking off the top of their head on some topic, and they were done. I want you in this meeting to write speeches that are well crafted, that you feel proud to go deliver in front of an audience because they have a strong message and the way you're going to deliver it is going to be entertaining. So judges look for this. So what are the judges looking for? They're looking for speech development. They're looking, I had a different one before. Let's see here. Okay, so the content is going to be 50%. It's going to be speech development, effectiveness, and the speech value. So this gets back to the theme or the message that we're going to deliver to our audience, right? Pick a great message that you know the entire audience wants to hear, and then you write your stories that support that theme. And then of course, the judges are going to look for the effectiveness. If you're doing humor and you're doing great story techniques and the audience gets the story, there was the conflict and then there was the resolution, and we watched the protagonist take this journey to get to the resolution. And in that journey, they learned a lesson. That's very effective. Making the audience laugh at some of the points is very effective, okay? Then we look at the physical nature of the speaker, the voice, and the mannerisms. We talked about all this as well. Physical and voice is what separates the speaker from the writer, right? Your manner, was it direct? Do you look confident in front of an audience? Are you moving gracefully? All of that indicates to the audience that you are a proficient speaker. If you're turning red and you're stumbling as you speak, that doesn't bode well for you. You don't look confident. You don't look like you're direct. Your voice is quivering. Get all that out of you. When you know you have a speech that you are just dying to deliver in front of an audience, you will have the confidence. You will have direct manner. You will be very enthusiastic to deliver your speech. And then they're going to look at the language. Was the grammar correct? Were there the removal of ahs and ums, right? Was the language appropriate for the audience? Jeff talked about sex, right? There are some words in sex that when you're talking about that topic are some people don't want to hear those words. So was the language appropriate for the audience? Okay. If your goal as a speaker is to have the audience have a fun ride, the language will be fun. When you look at the world champions, they use very simple language: car, dog, love, mom, dad, right? Very simple words. They're not doing very convoluted messages, because if it takes them a lot of words to explain what their message is, they've already lost their audience. The message should be able to be said in 10 words or less. And if you can say your message in 10 words or less, you should be able to deliver that speech with very, very simple words, very simple stories, very simple concepts. And the judges should be looking for that. Okay. We're not teaching calculus and we're not teaching quantum physics. Okay. When you're all done as a judge, you're going to put 3 names at the bottom of this ballot. Now, how do you judge when there's, let's say, 10 speakers or 5 speakers? You listen to the first speaker, then do you judge the second speaker against that first speaker? Then the third speaker comes, and now you have to judge that against 2 speakers? No. What you're going to do is you're going to have a benchmark speech in your head. I strongly suggest you go watch some of the world champions and pick one that you really like and go, there's my benchmark speech. That's my favorite speech of all time. And you rate the speaker against that benchmark speech. Okay? That benchmark speaker. What you're going to do when the Toastmaster of the event tells you the speaking order, they say speaker number 1, you put speaker number 1's name on column 10. If there's 5 speakers, speaker number 2 goes on column 8, speaker number 3 goes on column 6, speaker number 2 goes on column 4, and speaker number 5 goes on column 2. When speaker number 1 is done speaking, and you've rated that speaker against that benchmark speaker, you're going to fold that piece of paper so you don't see the score that you've given on column 10. And now you're going to rate the next speaker against your benchmark speaker. When that speaker's done and you've done rating them, you fold the piece of paper over that speaker's name so you don't see those scores either. So you continue to rate the speakers against a benchmark. And you've given points. When you're all done, you tally up all the points, and now you may have a couple speakers that are tied. As a judge, you cannot put any ties. And if there are 3 or more speakers, you must put 3 speakers on that piece of paper, and you must rate them 1, 2, or 3. That's your job as a speaker. You have to make the decision. If second and third ended up with the same points, you have to figure out which one moved me more, which one am I going to remember more. Whatever criteria you want to use, you pick one over the other, and then at the bottom of the ballot, you put the 3 names in, first, second, and third. Okay. Now, when all the ballots are collected, if 2 of the speakers end up with the same points, doesn't matter if first and second are tied or second and third are tied, they go to the tiebreaker ballot, which is this one. They're going to judge all the speakers the exact same way as any other judge. The only difference is at the bottom of the ballot, they're going to rate all 10 of the speakers if there were 10 speakers. They're going to rate them in that order. So the tiebreakers judge has they're going to end up with points as well. They may end up with ties on some of them. They're going to have to rate all 10 speakers from 1 to 10. And if any 2 speakers, when all the ballots are being tallied, are ranked or have a tie, you go to the tiebreakers ballot, and whatever speaker the tiebreaker ballot judge put higher, that gets that level. Okay. So any questions? Here we are. I think we've got 6 minutes. Any questions on being a contestant or being a judge? And if you're a judge, remember that these speakers, especially the ones that take it seriously, have spent a lot of time and a lot of effort to write speeches that they believe are going to be world stage worthy. And so it's very important that you judge the contests, knowing that the contestants have put a lot of time into this, right? Okay. Any comments, questions? Thank you, Omar, for interjecting various points. We like to hear different points of view.
Stephanie, do you have your hand up?
I did have my hand up and I took it down because I thought I'm not being seen on this little bit
Yeah.
on the side. I have a question about the judging form based
Sure.
on the information you've provided, and I agree with you. I have heard some amazing speeches, but I've recognized that they are not world champion speeches. And then I've heard average speeches, and I think, oh, the possibilities here are fantastic. But
Okay.
using the judging form as your criteria, the speech that isn't, is not going to make it, but it was delivered wonderfully, and they're the ones that win. So is my perception of what I am seeing and hearing? Are you?
Okay, no, that is an excellent, I love that question, Stephanie. You are judging that speech contest. You're not judging what that speech may be in the future. So even the speech that you don't think is world ready, even though it was the better delivered speech at that level, that speech also has the potential of morphing and changing. So you're judging what you think might happen in the future. That's not the job of the judges at a particular level. Which speech do you think demonstrated the best structure of content, organization, vocal variety, storytelling, humor? At that level, which speech do you think did the best?
No, and I understand that,
Yeah.
but isn't that how some of the speeches that really aren't the caliber of what a world champion speech needs to be, isn't that how they make it to the higher levels?
But every level, winners typically seek out people, or they go deliver the speech at other places, and they continue to morph their speeches.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, you're drawing the conclusion that the speech that has the better potential, that speaker is actually going to put the effort in to make it better, and that it will become better than the speech that you thought was better at that one level. So we must stay true to the level. The speeches that were delivered at that level, if you thought one was better, that should be the winner.
Okay.
Yeah. No, great question. Any other questions?
Peter, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to make a comment that the last year, at levels that I was not specifically a judge, I tried to follow along on the judge's form and just see how the reactions that I had as a general listener would match up to how I felt if I were trying to fill out the form. And I found that in the middle bunch of speeches, they may or may not match up as well. But I found that in general, a speech that really stood out and grabbed me also was the one that I would have scored the highest.
Okay, sure. And so what you're saying is that the speech that touched you, made you think, somehow it moved you. I mean, that's the point of the speech. And did you get the message of the speaker? If that speaker did all that to you, then that speaker was effective. That speaker accomplished what they were trying to do. Their whole goal was to give you a message. And everything else was rhetoric. The great storytelling, the great organization, the word choices, the movement, the way they were dressed, their lyric, all that is rhetoric to make you like that speaker. And then the content and using figures of speech and the emotional connections, all that made you like that speech. And if you remember that speech, for you, that was a powerful speech, right?
Yeah.
And what typically happens with the world stage winning speeches, they're speeches that move the majority of the audience. And therefore, in the audience, there's a swatch of people that are the judges. And they too were most moved by that one speaker, right? They got the message, they liked the way that the speaker delivered it. And so we hope that every level that happens. But I think at some of the lower levels, people come away from the contest going, I'm confused why the judges picked that one winner, right? So I hope that as we mature as a district, that we get in sync with our contestants and judges, so we're continually pushing forward the better speakers, so our district's name gets in light when they get to the semifinals or get onto the world stage, right? Any other questions? Karen.
Yeah, Lee, earlier on, Neha had asked, you mentioned a TED Talk, and she
Okay.
wanted to, if you could mention the name again, and
Sure.
also I wanted to know who, you mentioned Randy Harvey. Are there other world champions that we should go look for while we're training ourselves to be judges, good judges?
Okay, definitely. So what you can do is you can Google top 20 TED Talks and you'll see a link that shows the top 20. The top speaker is Sir Ken Robinson, and his whole speech is about classrooms kill creativity. He talks about how Western civilization, Europe, the New World, when it comes to education, there were two scores that were important, math and verbal. And he says the people that are not really valued are the artists, the dancers, the singers, the comedians, right? And so he talks about that, about how these creative people, and it's a great talk. And most of his talk, we just fall in love with him. He has one story in the middle of the TED Talk that is really powerful, but he really doesn't drive home the message until the end of the speech. And so I'm impressed with this because we like him. We continue to like him as he goes through. And I just think it's such a great speech, but there's other top 20 ones. There's Simon Sinek up there, The Power of Why. He's got an interesting talk.
Yeah.
There's some other ones. There's a lady who is a neuroscientist and she experiences a stroke. And the title of her speech is Stroke of Brilliance. And she knows she's having a stroke and she's taking notes, as a pure scientist would do, of herself having this stroke. And when she finally starts recovering from the stroke, she tells the audience about what she experienced. I mean, it's science in the field at the moment. So that's a cool one too. In terms of the world champions, the ones I like, you should see Randy Harvey 2004. You should see Ed Tate 2000. You should see Darren LaCroix 2001. You should see Presyan Vasilev 2014. He's the one who used the least amount of words to win the world champion. He's the guy that changes a tire. You should look at Mohammed Katani, 2016. Ryan Avery, 2012 and 2016 were both mentored by Randy Harvey. 2004 is my all-time favorite, Randy Harvey. Watch him. Those are my favorite. There's Vikas Jingram. I like his speech as well. He's somewhere around 2008, 2009. Jeff.
I was going to say David Henderson's.
Okay. David Henderson won the year Omar went
Yeah,
to the world stage.
David manages to take the audience down, just slaughter the audience emotionally.
Yeah. Now, 2010 is when David Henderson worked. That's when Omar took third place at his semifinal. The year Omar went to the world stage, Jack Elliott won, right? Mm-hmm. Omar, 2011. But yeah, David Henderson's an interesting story. He's a prosecutor. He prosecutes sex crimes. And what he does as part of a prosecutor, he has to bring these young children, he has to build a relationship with them. His team of people that work with him, they build a relationship so these children can get into the courtroom and tell their story. And so talk about a guy, he wins the world championship of public speaking, but he doesn't need to go out and be a motivational speaker. What he does as a profession is so profound and so important to him. It's beautiful. I actually cried when he did his interview. Yeah. The speech was cool, but when he did the interview, I was almost crying. So this guy was cool. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, I have a speech that I've used a number of times called Everyday Heroes, and I talk about people who do heroic things and don't think about the fact that they're heroic. And David Henderson in his day job is
heroic.
Exactly. Heroic.
He's really cool. Okay.
All right. I think let's since it's just after 8, I just want to, and Lee and I'll stay here if you have some more questions, but I did want to point out that I put the link to his resources in chat. I also have a feedback survey. It's just 3 questions. So both Lee and I would really appreciate it if you could go out there and fill that out. That would be terrific. I also wanted to mention, I know that some of you are going to be coming tomorrow night for the Vital Basics, Communication and Coordination. We have one of the speakers with us tonight, Baxter Kent. And this is an online training to help you set up, step up as contest chair or chief judge and run a great and smooth contest. So it would be great to see some of you there. And I'm going to stop the recording, but if you have some more questions, please continue to ask.
Yeah, just to add to what Karen was saying about tomorrow night, if you're serious about being a contestant, I strongly suggest that you become a chief judge, a contest chair, and a Toastmaster, and go through the process. So when you become a contestant, you know what to expect. That's also valuable information to know as well.